He authorized a CIA covert action against Cuba, and he put his brother in charge of the operation. It became known as Operation Mongoose.
Operation Mongoose was a sabotage project. It was a pinprick sabotage, as it worked out. It was a totally futile endeavor.
It was basically a political operation in favor of the Kennedys. I guess the Kennedys probably learned it at their father's knee in terms of don't get mad, get even. And I guess they were quite concerned about what they had done during the Bay of Pigs activity in the operation, and maybe felt some guilty conscience about the whole thing. Maybe they didn't, but whatever it was, they sure as heck had Castro in their sights and their target.
The Cuban operation was very much under the shadow of the Attorney General. He had many other things on his mind, but he would come regularly to the meetings of the Operation Mongoose people and urge them, exhort them to do more, and so on. He never knew precisely what he wanted them to do.
Lots of boom and bang is the phrase they used, which basically translated to sabotage operations. And they'd hoped to be able to get rid of Castro and the Castro regime just by snapping their fingers.
The operation was massive. I mean, they had truck depots, they had huge supplies of arms, they rented at least hundreds of cars, and set up camps, set up anti-Castro training camps in the Keys, in the Everglades, in the Bahamas at the time, and provided support for the training of the Cubans. And they were very successful. The operations were, in fact, doing a lot of harm. They were blowing up refineries. They were causing a lot of confusion and fear in Cuba.
46 were wounded, 2 killed under questionable circumstances. Castro, in a broadcast speech lasting most of the night, says bombs from U.S.-based planes are responsible for the casualties. Other reports say it was men in cars. Whatever his reasons, Castro stirs strong feelings of anger against the United States.
And the only decent thing that came out of the whole Mongoose operation, the boys in Miami, where we had our base, were able to recruit some little farmer or a peasant in Pinar del Rio province in the western part of Cuba. And he gave us a report, and all it said was, in an area bounded by 4 towns, it's the only report that mentioned these 4 towns. And if you plot these 4 towns on a map and connect them up with a thin line, you'll see you get what became called a trapezoid area. And that's what targeted the U-2. That's what finally got the U-2 over that particular spot. And the rest, of course, is now history. The U-2 came back with the pictures, and we had the evidence we needed. Kennedy had the evidence he needed.
Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on the island of Cuba.
And then President John began to speak, and I knew right away he wouldn't be weak. Well, he said he'd seen some missile bases and terrible smiles on Cuban faces, close pictures, carrying land reform too far, giving land to the USSR. Well, it said we mustn't be afraid, we're setting up a little blockade. Put our ships along the Cuban shores, and if the Russian bear yells and roars, we'll let him have it. From Turkey and Greece, Formosa and Spain, the peaceful West European plain. From Alaska and Greenland, we'll use our means and 20,000 submarines. We're gonna teach the Russians a lesson for trying to upset the balance of power.
One mistake can make this whole thing blow up, so that one major mistake by either Mr. Khrushchev or by us here. So that's why it's much easier to make speeches about some of the things that we ought to be doing, but I think that anybody who looks at the fatality lists on atomic weapons and realizes that the communists have a completely twisted view of the United States and that we don't comprehend them, that's what makes life in the 60s as it is.
Let's sink Cuba into the sea and give them back democracy under the water. Well, the deadline was set for 10 o'clock. For a Cold War, it was getting hot. Well, the Russians tried, the Russians failed. Homeward bound, those missiles sailed. Mr. Khrushchev said, better red than dead.
The Cuban